when it comes to dealing with mould in our lives. Sarah Bailey is a microbiologist and environmental consultant specialising in indoor air quality inspection. Hello, Sarah.
Good morning, Michael.
Thanks so much for joining us from WA at such an early time. So, look, we've been hearing here about the medical threats to our lives in a health sense from mould, and about some of the issues around construction of modern buildings from Tim. In your line of work, do we need to understand the nature of mould, because it is a living organism, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a fascinating organism. It's like anything. Most of the time it's doing good. We've got things like chocolate and wine and bread, and we wouldn't have those without mould. But the trouble is, when it's in the wrong place, it can cause a problem. And when it's inside your house, it can lead to ill health in some people.
Well, we've been actually reading some texts as well here, Sarah, while you've been waiting on. And let me just read this one to you, if I may. Jenny says, regarding the mould discussion, I live in an old semi-detached that has ongoing issues with mould. I've installed fans under the house. I have a dehumidifier, but I still get mould. I constantly have to wash down the walls using oil of cloves, that is. I can tell when it's growing because my skin gets terribly itchy. And another listener, Joy, also recommends cloves. We should talk about how we deal with removing mould and what the science says and what perhaps conjecture says as well, because I think there might be a difference between the two. Clove oil, is that a worthwhile thing to start using on our walls?
Actually is, yeah. Clove oil does have antifungal properties, and so do tea tree and eucalyptus oil. But you do need to be a little bit careful, because if you're using any cleaning chemicals, they can sort of lead on to other issues if you're using them in large amounts. For example, bleach can trigger asthma as well. So Just be careful with what amounts you're using. When you're cleaning up any mould at all, there's sort of two key things to look for. There's the cleaning side of it, and then there's the prevention side of it. So
yes.
if you're just cleaning it and not doing any prevention, it's going to come back. So
you've got to build a foundation for prevention long term while cleaning the short term evidence of it being there. And that's going to be hard for those people in flood affected areas of New South Wales and Queensland, where sometimes, of course, they may see mould but may be loath to start cleaning because they're waiting for an insurance assessment. And that could be a dangerous situation by the sound of it.
It could. It's a very difficult situation to be in when you can see mould in your house, but you've got to wait for an insurer who's maybe, sort of overwhelmed with calls. So if anyone does want to start cleaning up, the one thing I've come across mostly is that people have thrown things away without documenting what they've done. So if you do want to start doing anything yourself, before you've got to talk to an insurer, is take photographs of absolutely everything, every single thing, and then go around and do it again, so that you've got evidence of what kind of state the house was in, and then what kind of things you've had to dispose of. That's sort of going to be best for your insurance claim. But and
what things should we be throwing out? I mean, no question. Even though it may be one of the most important things to your life in a memory sense, what are the things we just can't think about including in the house after a flood event?
Well, after a flood event, if your house has been inundated by flood water, that's actually can be quite dirty, because it'll have a lot of dirt in it and silt. So things like your sofa, if that's been inundated, that's not going to be salvageable. Sort of the more absorbent things that are going to absorb water, they're probably not going to be salvageable at all. There's a really good place that people can go to for some really good advice that's not, it doesn't induce panic. And that's WA Health have released a mould and dampness guideline.
Great.
And they consulted with a lot of people in the industry before they did that. And if anyone's worried about mould, be it from a flood or even in a small area in their bathroom, that's a really good place to start, because it has very sensible, practical advice that doesn't, sometimes if you go on Google, you'll end up quite panicked by what you find on there. But if you start with this mould guideline, it's got very sensible advice that is very rational and doesn't lead you to panic when you don't need to.
Well, we'll put links up to that. And Sarah, just before I let you go on all of this, it sounds to me from what Tim was saying about modern housing and some of the issues around mould that they present, that's been actually noticed in evidence of survey, that some of the older housing in Australia does pretty well because it's better ventilated.
Yeah, what we find when we're looking at houses is a lot of the mould jobs that we go to are in more modern houses, again, because of the construction of them that Tim mentioned, but also a lot of houses today are built to a cost, not a quality. So you get a lot of things like gutters perhaps not installed properly and seals around windows not installed properly. So, yeah, the modern houses do tend to do quite a bit worse than, say, your normal 1950s fibro house that's quite well ventilated.
And remediation is possible, but it's going to take some time. And from what Tim was saying, there's lack of regulation. So we need to just, think about that.
There is. I definitely agree with what Tim said. Try and find a cleaner or remediator that's associated with the IICRC, and they've got a little green and blue logo on their websites usually, and they have to meet a certain standard that's in the United States, but at least shows that they've got some training and they'll hopefully do the job to a higher quality without contaminating the rest of your house.